Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Karten webinar. This webinar is about mobile technology, tips, tricks and features, and I'm delighted that we have Martin Pistorius, who is the Karten Network's mobile technology advisor, presenting the key part of this webinar. Just before we make a start, I'd like to let you know that all delegates are in listen-only mode. If you could use the question pane to ask questions as the webinar proceeds, that would be really helpful. And we'll try and answer as many of these questions as we go along. But rest assured that if we don't answer them, or if there are some that we can't answer, we'll make sure that we take them all by the end of the webinar. The recording of this webinar will be available after the session, and a link will be sent through with follow-up emails and any resources that support the session. To help us to improve the webinar programme, we'd really welcome your feedback and ideas for future webinars and events. So if you'd email those to myself, that would be really welcome. Just a bit of network news. So applications for additional equipment for existing centres can be made every 3 years up to a maximum of £25,000. The next deadline for the trustees meeting that will be held in March 2018 is the 19th of January. If you're planning on submitting an application on the 19th of January or by the 19th of January, if you could please let me know. My email address is on the end of this presentation, if you've not already got it. Just drop me an email, let me know that you're planning on submitting an application, and then I can make sure that I give you the very best support possible through that application process. If any of you are planning to pop an application in and I've not visited recently, then part of that process requires me to pop along and visit your organisation to discuss your ideas and your needs. Just a quick reminder that we've still got a Christmas card competition running. I've not had any entries yet. I know there's still plenty of time to go, and the competition is to find our 2018 Karten Christmas card. So the deadline for this is 12th night, 6th of January. We invite entries, either stills or animations, photographs of original artwork, absolutely perfect. And everybody that submits an application will be given a certificate, and the winners will be announced later on in 2018. And of course, the winning designs will be used as our Christmas card for next year. Just a bit of information about a project that the the Karten Network is involved with as the lead UK partner. It's a Horizon 2020 project to develop a piece of software called Voice It, and there are other partners in Israel, Spain, and Italy. And as the partner in the UK, the Karten Network is providing organisations or supporting our Karten Centre organisations to test and develop Voice It with the development team. Voice It is a piece of software that translates unintelligible speech using the speaker's own voice and real time. It translates that unintelligible speech into something that can be more easily understood. So it's a really great opportunity to get involved in this development project. Again, if you'd like to let me know if you'd like to be involved in the testing, and I can bring you up to speed with what's going on with that project. And at this point, I'm going to take just a few seconds to switch over the presenter rights to Martin, and he's going to take us through his presentation. So I really hope you enjoy it.
Thanks, Dawn. Good afternoon. As Dawn mentioned, my name is Martin Pistorius, and I am the Mobile Technology Advisor. My main role is to provide support to Karten centers in the use of mobile technology. As the title of this afternoon's session alludes to, the aim of this webinar is to talk you through the native, or in other words, inbuilt features of mobile operating systems. Some of what I am going to cover you may know. However, I'm hoping that there will be something useful for everyone, which will make using mobile devices easier to use either for yourself or the people you work with. Questions. While I will do my best to answer any questions, for practical reasons, I will do so at the end. I considered including screenshots in the presentation. However, I felt it may be too much. So I am going to live on the wild side and try to demonstrate what I am talking about as I go. Being an AAC user, this may be tricky, so please bear with me. Oh, and due to technical reasons I can unfortunately only show one device, so I have opted for an iOS device. While you could include Windows as a mobile device operating system, for today, I am going to focus on Apple's iOS and Google's Android. While I will do my best to cover both Android and iOS, there is probably a bit of a bias towards iOS, partly because iOS devices are far more prevalent within the Karten network, and despite all Google's efforts with Android's accessibility, the accessibility features in iOS are still far superior. I'm going to strive to keep things simple and to not use too much jargon. However, because I am trying to be a bit general, I'm going to talk about iOS and Android rather than specific devices. So, when I talk about iOS, it may be easier to think an iPad or iPhone. Similarly, if I am talking about Android, think of your Samsung phone or tablet, for example. A lot of these features are typically termed accessibility. However, because that term may cause some people to be reluctant to use them, I like to think of them more as features that simply make it easier for anyone to use a mobile device. There are a lot of features and settings. Simply to give us some structure, I have decided to group them in terms of vision. In other words, people who could benefit from assistance accessing what is displayed on the screen. Interaction. Features that assist people to interact with the screen. Hearing. Features that assist people to access the audio of a device. And learning. Features to assist people with learning difficulties. Despite these groupings, it doesn't mean that a particular feature is exclusively for someone with a particular impairment. For example, someone with a visual impairment could benefit from a screen reader, but equally someone that has perfect vision but who is dyslexic. To access on iOS, you tap the gear icon from there, scroll down, and tap on General. Scroll down and tap on Accessibility. For Android, it varies slightly depending on the version of Android and the device manufacturer's flavor of Android. But in general, the process is the same. Swipe down from the top of the screen. Tap on the gear icon, scroll down until you find Accessibility. Both iOS and Android allow you to create shortcuts to their accessibility settings which you may find useful if you are constantly needing to change them. To do this on iOS, tap on the gear, scroll down to Accessibility. Once there, scroll all the way to the bottom of the options where you will find the accessibility shortcut. Tap on it and you can set which accessibility features you would like quick access to. When your options are chosen, you can then access them by simply pressing the home button 3 times in quick succession. I will talk a little bit about iOS 11, which is the latest version of Apple's mobile device operating system a bit later. But I wanted to mention here that in iOS 11 it is now possible to customize the control center, including adding shortcuts to the accessibility options. The control center are the options you get when you swipe up from the bottom of the screen. On Android devices it varies a little bit, depending on the version of Android you are using. For example, in Android 6, also known as Marshmallow, it is called Direct Access. Whereas in Android 5, also known as Android Lollipop, it is called Accessibility Shortcut. The exact way you access this shortcut also differs. If you are using Android Lollipop, you access by pressing and holding the power button, or by holding two fingers on the screen. To be honest, this tends to be a bit flaky, and you can easily turn the device off by mistake. Things are better in Android Marshmallow, which works much like Apple's version. You press the home button 3 times to activate the shortcut. If you do decide to activate the accessibility shortcut, you can do so by going into Settings, tapping on Accessibility, and then tapping on either Direct Access or Accessibility Shortcut and enabling it. There are instructions on the screen which will tell you how to activate the particular version of shortcut. One thing I thought to mention before moving on to the specific features is user profiles. In other words, if you had a group of people with different needs, you would set a device for them, and the settings would change based on who logged into the device. Unfortunately, iOS devices are still designed to be single-user devices. In iOS 9, a multi-user feature was introduced. But this is only available if the devices are registered as part of Apple Education Deployment Program. There are ways around this, but they are very cumbersome and not quite fit for purpose. Android, on the other hand, to support multiple user profiles. I personally have never played with this feature, but in theory you could create a user account and set up the device up for a particular user. Then whenever they sign in, their group of settings will get loaded. For instance, if Jane needs a screen reader, but Paul needs high contrast. Looking at the vision features. As I mentioned earlier, while these features are primarily aimed at people with a visual impairment, however, they could just as easily be used to assist who has good vision but struggles to read text. Perhaps the most obvious one is to adjust the font size. The range of options here depends on the version of iOS or Android, with the later versions offering better support for this. To set the font size in iOS, tap on the gear icon to enter the Settings screen, tap on General, then tap on Accessibility. Tap on the Larger Text option, and adjust to suit the needs. It is also possible to set all the text to bold. To do this, go into the Accessibility options and tap on Enable Switch to enable bold text. Text. The device will need to restart for bold text to be enabled, or disabled for that matter. If you are using an Android device, swipe down from the top of the screen or tap on the gear icon to access the settings. Scroll down and tap on Accessibility. Similar to iOS, there are slightly different options depending on the version of Android running on the device. Earlier versions simply have a large text switch to enable it, whereas later versions allow you to set the font size from a range of options. In Android there is an option to bold the text too. However, it is called high contrast text. It effectively bolds the text, although it goes a step further and will also adjust the text color based on the background. iOS provides a number of options to adjust the actual display. It is possible to increase the contrast of display. The name may be a little misleading, as when you hear the word contrast you tend to think white text on a black background. In this case, this option allows you to reduce the transparency and darken the colors of the display to improve legibility. To set this, tap through the setting until you are in the accessibility options. Tap on Increase Contrast. Contrast. You can now choose to either reduce transparency or darken colors, or both, by tapping on the Enable switch. If you navigate back to Accessibility Options, you have another option to enable button shapes. I think this name is a little vague. What this option does is effectively underlines any text that is used to navigate. However, this excludes underlining the text underneath app icons. It's a bit like setting all links on a website to be underlined to provide an additional visual cue that tapping on it will take you somewhere. The Reduce Motion option found within the Accessibility Options effectively allows you to turn off all the fancy transition animations that you get when you open an app. So rather than grow from small to big when you tap in an app, it simply opens it. If you navigate to the Accessibility Options in Settings and then tap on Reduce Motion, turn off the various animations and effects, as well as choose not to have message effects automatically be triggered. They will only be shown if you tap on them. Finally, we have on/off switch labels. Again, I feel the name may be a little ambiguous. Essentially, what this does is simply add a symbol similar to what you might find on an electrical switch to all the virtual option switches. Android currently doesn't quite have these kinds of options. It is possible to turn off animation though. However, this needs to be done through the developer options, which is disabled by default. While it's not difficult to, so I'm not going to into that today. If you would like to know how to do that, perhaps send me an email and I will talk you through it. Both iOS and Android also support a high contrast option, with the newer versions of the operating systems offering more features. To access these options on iOS, as you probably gathered, tap on the gear icon to enter the Settings screen, tap on General, then tap on Accessibility. Now tap on the Display Accommodations. This gives you 4 to adjust. Invert colors. This is your standard high contrast display. Apple redesigned these options in iOS 11, so you now can choose to enable Smart Invert. This will invert all the colors except for images and some media. So a mostly white screen with black text will change to a black screen with white text. It will preserve the original colors of images and other media, but increase the darkness of colors. The classic invert option does much the same, however applies the effect to everything including images, which mean images appear as almost a photo negative. The color filters option could be really useful for someone who is colorblind, or who finds it easy to read on a different color display. Once enabled, you have the option to set the display to grayscale, or apply a color filter designed for a particular kind of color blindness, or you can adjust the colors yourself. There are also options to set the screen brightness automatically and adjust the intensity of the display by reducing the white point. These are options that anyone may find useful and may help to reduce eye strain. Android 2 has equivalent options. Swipe down from the top of the screen or tap on the gear icon to access the settings. Scroll down and tap on Accessibility. The name of the option varies depending on the version of operating system. The high contrast setting is typically called either negative colors or color inversion. Irrespective of the name, enabling this option inverts the colors, making dark colors light and light colors dark, giving you the high contrast display. There are no settings, it is merely either turn it on or off. Similar to iOS, in Android you can apply color filters by selecting either color adjustment or color correction, depending on your version of Android. The version of Android also determines what setting you have. Some will only offer you a predefined list of options to adjust the screen for the common forms of color blindness. Other versions of Android will guide you through a set of tasks to determine the best color display for your needs. Magnifying the screen. In iOS, when you navigate to the accessibility options in settings, it may be slightly misleading as there is a zoom and magnifier option. If you tap and enable the magnifier option, it will allow you the option to use your device's camera as a magnifier. To activate it, press the home button 3 times in quick succession to activate the magnifier. I remember Matt Harrison, who presented last week's webinar, saying how he used this option on his iPad when he found himself alone in a hotel room and was unable to read the thermostat. Using it, he was able to see enough to adjust the temperature of the room. The zoom feature found in the accessibility options is screen magnifier in iOS. Tapping on zoom presents you with a number of settings from which you can choose to zoom part of, or the entire screen. If you wish to apply a color filter, show the controller and set the magnification of the zoom. What may take a bit of getting used to is the fact that to activate and use zoom you need to use 3 fingers. Some people may find this a bit awkward. Double tapping 3 fingers displays or hides the zoom. 3 fingers are used to move around the screen, and double tap and drag allows you to change the zoom. Android chose to call their magnifier gestures. Tap your way through Android's setting until you find yourself in the vision of the accessibility options. Once enabled, triple tapping a single finger on the screen will magnify the screen. You then need to use 2 fingers to move the magnifier around the screen. And finally, both iOS and Android have fully fledged screen readers. iOS calls its screen reader VoiceOver. VoiceOver. Navigate to the accessibility options in setting and enable VoiceOver. This will immediately cause the device to start speaking, reading the screen. You are then required to double tap OK on the notice window that will appear, acknowledging that by enabling VoiceOver the gestures used to interact with the device will change. You now need to double tap to open anything. Dragging your finger across the screen will cause any text under your finger to be read. 3 fingers are now needed to scroll. There are a host of settings which I am not going to go through in any detail. However, it may be worth mentioning that it is possible to connect Braille devices to both input and output text through the iPad. Personally, I have no experience with this, but it would mean that you could in theory use a Braille keyboard to type on the mobile device, and a refreshable Braille display to read the screen in Braille. The built-in screen reader on Android is called TalkBack. To enable it, navigate to the accessibility options, locate TalkBack and enable it. A notification will appear informing you about the system access TalkBack requires. Tap OK, and TalkBack starts speaking. It too changes the gestures used to interact with the device. Moving your finger around the screen reads what is beneath it. Double tap selects items. It too has a host of settings that I'm not going to go into any detail on. However, one of the settings enables the volume keys to be pressed together to dim the screen, thus saving battery power. Looking at the features to assist with interaction. This is the area where iOS is better than Android. On iOS, if you tap on the gear icon to enter the Settings screen, tap on General, then tap on Accessibility and scroll down to the Interaction section. From here, in the Home button setting, you can adjust the double and triple click speed required for the Home button to be activated, as well as if Siri is activated if the Home button is held down or not. If you navigate to the touch accommodations, you can adjust the sensitivity of the touch screen and how it reacts to touches. Once enabled, triple clicking the Home button will toggle if touch accommodation is on or off. The hold duration enables you to set how long the screen must be touched before it registers as being touched. It is also possible to set the duration between touches, so that repeated touches are filtered out. Both of these features could be useful for people with coordination difficulties. The Tap Assistance allows you to set if the first or last touch is registered as a tap. This could help someone who is finding it difficult to tap on something accurately to slide their finger to the icon they want and then move their hand away. For people who struggle to touch the screen with their hands and may use a head pointer, stylus, or joystick, the Assistive Touch option provides a small on-screen menu. Assistive Touch creates a virtual home button on screen, a menu option to double tap and perform multi-figure gestures. It is also possible to create custom gestures. For example, if you navigate to the Assistive Touch option, found under the Accessibility options, scroll down and tap on Create New Gesture. On the gesture recording screen, you will be asked to touch to create a gesture. Rotate two fingers on the iPad screen around a point between them. You can do this with the single finger, joystick, or stylus. Just create each arc separately, one after the other. If it doesn't turn out quite right, tap Cancel, then try again. When you are happy with it, tap Save, and give the gesture a name. Perhaps rotate 90 degrees, then, for example, rotate the view in Maps. Open Maps, tap the Assistive Touch menu button, and choose Rotate 90 from Custom. When the blue circles representing the starting finger positions appear, drag them to the point around which you want to rotate the map, then release. Earlier versions of Android support for touch features was very poor. However, it has improved in the more recent versions of Android. If you navigate to the accessibility features by swiping down from the top of the screen or tap on the gear icon to access the settings. Scroll down and tap on Accessibility, then select Dexterity and Interaction. From here you can set a tap and hold delay. While not as extensive as in iOS, this setting will enable the sensitivity of the touch screen to be reduced, which may help people who struggle with coordination. Some Android devices support an air-wake feature. When enabled, it allows the device to be woken up by simply moving something in front of it. However, this tends to be quite limited. The Assistant menu, very similar to the Assistive touch option in iOS, once enabled, creates a small on-screen menu which allows a person to navigate and perform multi-finger gestures using the on-screen menu. The Interaction Control feature allows you to customize the interactive applications and areas of the screen. So you can set which parts of the screen interact to being touch, as well as disable auto-rotation and hard keys. Both iOS and Android support external devices. iOS again has better support for this. Navigating to the keyboard, found under the Accessibility options, allows you to set the duration for key repeating. This means that the sensitivity of an external keyboard can be adjusted. The slow keys option sets the duration a key is held down before it is registered. This can help people who struggle to quickly release a key. It is also possible to enable sticky keys. This holds down the Shift key until the following key is pressed, meaning you don't need to ever press two keys at the same time. This is a feature I use a lot. On Android, the options are limited. In fact, there are usually no options for this under accessibility. However, if you navigate to Settings, and then Language and Input, it is possible to set the pointer speed if an external pointing device is connected. Switch access on iOS is comprehensive. By navigating to the switch control, found under the Accessibility options, switch scanning can be enabled. Note that Assistive touch needs to be disabled for switch scanning to be enabled. Switches can be external switches, the camera, the entire screen. All kinds of scanning styles and actions are supported. One of the nice features is called recipes. This allows you to create a string of actions that can be programmed to complete complex tasks. This means a person could select one action which could perform a string of actions quickly, saving the switch scanner time and effort. iOS supports auditory feedback too, either through sound effects or speech, to assist the person using switch scanning. Switch scanning was only added to Android, Lollipop and later. Ironically, the switch scanning setting are found under the Vision section of the Accessibility options on Android. To the best of my knowledge, only one or two switches are supported. The scanning options are a bit limited too. Spoken feedback can be provided, but as far as I know, there is no other auditory feedback. Looking at the features that assists people to access the audio output of a device. I must admit I don't know very much about hearing aid support on mobile devices. I know that iOS has built-in support for MFI hearing aids. And the general impression I have is that often a third-party app, especially on Android, for audio to be directly sent through the mobile device. iOS supports subtitles, captioning and audio description for media playback where supported. These can be enabled by, as you probably know by now, tapping on the gear icon to enter the Settings screen, tap on General, then tap on Accessibility, scroll down to Media. Closed captioning can also be enabled in Android. These can be found in the Accessibility setting under Hearing. One quite sweet feature I have seen is on some Android devices, you can enable the device to alert you with a vibration when it detects a baby crying. Both iOS and Android support a wide range of notifications. This can usually be set on a per-app basis, either within the app's settings or under notifications. Looking at features to assist people with learning difficulties. iOS supports this quite well through its guided access feature. Guided access allows you to limit access to an iOS device, restricting it to the use of a single app, and even disabling hardware buttons, and setting a time limit on how long the app can be used. To set up guided access, navigate to Guided Access, found under the Accessibility options. Scroll down, as it's the last option there. Tap on the Guided Access switch to enable it. Set a passcode. Code. Now press the Home button to exit settings. Navigate and open the app you want to use. Now while you are in that app, press the Home button 3 times in quick succession. This will display a smaller version of the app and allow you to set the guided access options. Once you are happy with this, tap Start in the top right-hand corner of the screen. If you want to exit guided access at any point, press the Home button 3 times in quick succession, enter your passcode and you will be back to full device access. On Android, support for this sort of functionality is extremely limited, if it exists at all. There are third-party apps that do similar things. And you could always create a limited user profile, but that is about the best you can get at the moment. Due to my disability, I must admit my experience with Siri and Hey Google is very limited. However, these voice recognition systems have advanced significantly in the last few years. And for those people who can speak, they offer a realm of options. From controlling the device, responding to the commands and questions, and dictating. In other words, speaking, and having what you say converted into text. How accurate it is in real use I'm not sure, but from what I can establish it is not bad at all. I would like to spend a couple of minutes talking about iOS 11. A host of accessibility features arrived with the latest iOS version, some of which I touched on earlier, like the enhanced dynamic type, redesigned invert colors, and customizing the control center. VoiceOver can now describe images. For videos, there are spoken or Braille display captions. Support for Braille editing has also been expanded. Then, for people like me, you can also now enable the Type to Siri mode. This allows you to communicate with Siri by typing. You need to enable this feature first though. To do this, navigating to the Siri accessibility options, and tap on the Type to Siri option to enable it. There is better support for PDFs, making them more accessible. Switch control typing has also been improved, plus a bunch of other enhancements. I also thought to talk very briefly about upgrading operating system. As a rule of thumb, I would always recommend upgrading, especially if they are point releases, in other words from iOS 10 to iOS 10.2. However, if it's a major update, in other words from iOS 10 to iOS 11, and if you or the people support it depending on some form of assistive technology or app on a mobile device, I would wait a bit. This would allow time for any bugs to be fixed first, and for the app developers and manufacturers to update their software. If you do have a number of devices, and you are concerned about compatibility, I would also suggest upgrading one device and test it first. If it's okay, only then update all your devices. I would also now start to think about if your devices can support the newer iOS versions. It used to be that iOS was fairly consistent across versions. However, with the pace of development, it is fast becoming a reality that you could end up with two versions of devices that work slightly different. For example, the way you unlock an iOS device has changed. A few other cool things you may not know about. On both iPhones and Android devices, it is possible to set an emergency contact and even set it to be accessed quickly through the press of a button. On iOS, this is done by going to Setting, scrolling down and tapping on Emergency SOS. If you choose to enable, you can press the power button rapidly 5 times and the phone will automatically call your specified emergency contact. On Android, this option is often called Safety Assistant, which you can find in Settings. Once that is set up and enabled, the Send Help messages will automatically send a help message including photos and audio to your emergency contact. It is also now possible to record the device's screen, which may be useful to you either to gather evidence or to create help videos. To activate this, tap on Settings. Scroll down to Control Center. Tap on Customize Controls. Tap on the green plus next to Screen Recording. Recording. Press the Home button to exit settings. Now double tap on circle within a circle icon. There will be a 3-second delay and it will then start recording the screen. When you are done, tap on the red bar at the top of your screen and the video will be saved to your pictures. I could probably go on, as there are things I have not even touched on, but I think we'll conclude there. I will end off by saying that similar to what Phil talked about in his webinar on assistive technology assessment, it is very important to get feedback and try options with people to determine what works for them. For example, some may find bold text harder to read, others may find it very useful. Some of the features are not purely useful for access, some can help to improve battery life and performance, or simply reducing the strain on your eyes. I must also add that while all the accessibility options we have been through this afternoon will hopefully make using a device easier. The accessibility options are also dependent on how well the app developers create their apps. So you may still find that some apps simply don't work with an accessibility feature. I hope this was helpful. Thank you for your time and attention. I will now hand back to Dawn.
Sorry, I've just realised that I didn't unmute my microphone. So thank you, Martin, very much indeed for that fascinating presentation. I can't wait to get back into it and have a look at some of these details and features in more detail and try things out for myself and think about who we might be able to use some of those accessibility features for. I'm sure that there are people out in the network that are using kind of specific aspects, but to get that broader overview was really, really useful. Just to finish off today, again, there are some ways of keeping in touch with the network there. So through Facebook, Twitter, website, our newsletter. We're hoping to publish possibly tomorrow. If not tomorrow, definitely Monday. We've got a bumper Christmas issue coming out, and I hope you'll really enjoy that. There's some really, really interesting articles in there about some of the fabulous work that's going on across the network. And I think, yeah, that the next slide is just a reminder that myself, Martin, Debbie for our Israeli centres are available to offer direct support to yourselves. I know we have a number of organisations that contact us and request support, and we're able to go along and support different centres in ways that, according to their needs. So if you've got anything that you're struggling with, or you want to perhaps talk about how somebody else might have used some particular aspect of assistive technology, just let us know, and we can either assist you ourselves or put you in contact with somebody else within the network who would be of interest to you. And just before we end, you will probably have seen an email that I sent out a little bit earlier this week that is advertising an assistive technology post. It's working in partnership the Karten Network and NatSpec within the Tech Ability Service. There is a vacancy, currently a vacancy for a full-time assistive technology post. Applications for that post close early in the new year, and we are interviewing on the 15th of January. If anybody's interested in that post and they'd like further details, then please drop me an email and we can schedule a telephone call to talk about it in more detail. And we're willing to consider all sorts of flexible ways of filling that vacancy. So whether there's a job share or a secondment opportunity, we're happy to put pieces of the jigsaw together to end up with the right people or person in post and hopefully impacting across the range of centres in the network. So thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon. As I say, the recordings and resources will be available for your reference and your use later. So look out for those coming through email. Have a nice evening. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.